Okay. So look, as I say, we're going to talk about the concept of positive psychology and what it is. And really, I guess um, was it Margaret, were you the one who said positive psychology is about being positive?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, look, and that's really it. And why is it relevant? Why is it important? So it was a guy called Martin Seligman. He's a psychologist in the US. He was at one time the head of the American Psychological Association, who really, I guess, looked to bring this into mainstream psychology. And the reason for that was that what we know is that lower optimism will tend to be associated with lower cortisol production and higher heart rate variability. And as you'll know from some of our earlier sessions, that when we have lower cortisol production and higher heart rate variability, that is what is typically a stress reaction. Okay. So these are the things that we want to be able to manage. Optimistic people are on average healthier, they live longer than pessimistic people. And optimistic people tend to have higher levels of life satisfaction, which again, I suppose, is common sense. Um, if I was to ask everybody here, who would say they are an optimist?
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
I would say the
Yeah,
same.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Who would say they are a pessimist? Anyone? No. Who would say they're a realist? Anyone? Your eyes are realist.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So optimism, pessimism, and realism, they're interesting dynamics. And oftentimes people never want to consider themselves to be a pessimist because that sounds very negative. Optimist sounds like it's a positive thing to have. Realism is an interesting one because realism can often be perceived by optimists as pessimism. Because when an optimist comes to a person with an idea and thinks it's terrific, and someone knocks it down, they may say, "Well, you've been very pessimistic on that." So I suppose they're not exact dichotomies in terms of how they all sit together, but there is certainly an interesting piece in terms of reflecting how you are in relation to situations. Typical things you will see if someone comes to you with an idea. Do you see the reasons why it would work? Or are you someone who is likely to say, no, I don't really think that's going to be a good idea? When news comes at you, particularly if we think about the COVID-19, do we spend our time looking to confirm the negatives that we're perceiving? Or are we spending time looking for the positives that will make us feel a brighter future ahead? So it's all things you can ask yourself. There's lots of stuff in your personality profiles. If any of you have completed that, will give you some insights into that. But it is interesting, okay? And again, going back to our world of positive psychology. So the reason that Martin Seligman wants to bring this into play was to give people a framework to be able to measure and rate themselves on how they are on the positive psychology scale, okay? So what does that all mean? So what is it? It's the scientific study of human flourishing and an applied approach to optimal functioning. It has also been defined as a study of strengths and virtues that enable individuals, communities, and organizations to thrive. So the basic premise of positive psychology was if we can harness it, we can enter into what's called a state of flow. And a state of flow is when we feel we are floating on a cloud. We're in a all singing, all dancing, positive place in our lives, personally and professionally. Okay. Now, if you feel at certain points in your life that there's things that are, well, there's some good things going on and there's some not so good things going on. The premise of the positive psychology framework is to be able to identify where are those negatives coming from. Because if we can look at where the negatives are coming from, we can take action in relation to them. And if we can look at where the positives are coming from, we can reflect on them and take satisfaction with the fact that we do have elements in our life that are bringing positivity to ourselves. Okay. Clear so far?
Yeah.
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 Good. All right. So look, what's the benefits of it and why was it all brought in? So look, simple stuff, increased lifespan. If we feel more positive, we live longer. You'll often see it, people who tend to live sort of to 90s and 100s tend to be people, when people say, why did you live so long? They say, oh, well, I don't take life too seriously, or, you know, well, I try to socialize as much as possible, or I do things I enjoy. So these are the sorts of things you'll tend to hear, but generally they will have a more positive outlook. Lower rates of depression. So depression tends to exist, I suppose, in negative circumstances. Lower levels of distress. Greater resistance to the common cold. Anybody get a cold this winter?
No.
No?
No.
Anyone? No? Everyone was good? Okay. So, yeah, look, when we're stressed, our immune system is weaker, because what it's doing is it's fighting all the negative influences that are going on in the body. So, so yeah, just when you feel positive, you tend to be able to battle through these things. Better psychological and physical well-being. A lot of stuff can be psychosomatic. So we talk about physical well-being. Oftentimes you may hear people who are in stress situations talk about, oh, I've a pain in my back, or I have a headache, or my stomach feels really bad. So again, when we feel positive, those things can often go away. So they may be more from the psychological side than physical side in relation to what the root cause of those are. Reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease. So again, stressed people, or people who feel anxiety more than most, will be more likely to suffer from cardiovascular issues, and better coping skills during hardships and times of stress. Okay. So again, what we think about when we think about positive psychology is how can we use the frameworks that are there to make sure that we are measuring how we are doing in relation to positivity. Okay. So the framework that was arrived at from Martin Seligman and the School of Positive Psychology was what's called PERMA, okay? And what I'd like you to do from today is be able to take this away, and it's something for you to reflect on, be it weekly, monthly, 6 monthly, and just see, well, how am I stacking up in relation to that? Because it changes. As you will know through your own lives, there's times where you will feel great, positive, happy, and there's times where you will just feel like nothing is going your way. And that's just the cycle of life, and it's to do with all the changes and all the different things that we have going on in our lives. So the P looks for positive emotion, okay? So positive emotions are an essential part of our well-being. Happy people will look back in the past with gladness, and they look into the future with hope, and they enjoy and cherish the present. So again, thinking about in a day-to-day setting for yourselves or people who you deal with, what happens when you look back on the past? Do you have regrets about things that you didn't do? Do you feel bad about certain things that maybe you didn't achieve that you're hoping to? And does that prey on your thoughts? Does that prey on your mind? In terms of the future, do you feel fear about the future? Do you feel that there's negatives coming in relation to the future? Or do you look at the future as a time for opportunity and hope? Okay. And in terms of the present, do you spend time stopping and thinking? We did mindfulness a few weeks back, and that's very much about being able to enjoy the present. So stopping and thinking about what is it that's happening right now in the present. Okay. And that's the real driver of positive emotion. Because the opposite of that is if we look back with regrets, if we look to the future with fear, and if we feel anxiety in our day-to-day living, we are tending to experience negative emotion. Okay. Engagement. Okay. So making sure that we have levels of engagement. Okay. So what that really looks at is when we focus on the things we truly enjoy and care about, we can begin to engage completely in the present moment and enter in what's known as a state of flow, which we talked about earlier on. So it's all about, are you engaged in the things that you're doing personally, professionally, things you do in your leisure time? Are you engaged in them? Do you feel excitement about them? Are they something that makes you bounce out of bed in the morning? Okay. So just how much does it mean to you to be doing the things that you're doing? Okay. Again, the theory being, if we do things that we enjoy and care about, we are going to enter into that state of flow, and it's not going to feel like it's an effort. Okay. Relationships, hugely important. Regardless whether you're introvert, extrovert, regardless of your personality type, everyone needs someone. The human race has existed on the basis of social interaction. Okay. So from the time going back to the caveman where they formed communities, we see it now. People tend to, form friends, family units. We like to get together. And probably one of the things that's been hardest during the coronavirus situation for many people is that inability to socialize and meet with people. I know myself, we'd a socially distanced barbecue with a couple of my pals on Friday night, and these are lads I see all the time. But it was like I was so excited going down to it, which was like, you know, such a change. Because like, God, the idea of actually sitting down and actually having a conversation face to face with people just felt huge. So we tend to get, and I would have experienced a lot of positive emotion having engaged in that interaction because I'd been missing that aspect of the relationships. Okay. So we enhance our well-being and share it with others by building strong relationships with the people around us. And that's family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, whoever you have relationships with. Okay. So think carefully about the relationships that you have. Do you spend time with people who make you feel good? Or do you spend time with people who, at the end of a conversation, you feel worse about yourself? And if you feel worse about yourself, disengage from those relationships. Evaluate and analyze where you are. Meaning. We are at our best when we dedicate time to something that's greater than ourselves. Okay. So looking at things outside ourselves, it could be religion, community, work, family, politics, charity, professional or creative goal. So something that just goes beyond the day to day, that feeling that you're on the hamster wheel and just keeping up with things. So dedicating yourself to something outside of that. Okay. And then finally, accomplishment. So what are we here to accomplish? Everybody has a drive to win. It doesn't mean you have to be the best, or it doesn't mean you have to be victorious at certain things, but it just says that you need to be able to push yourself forward so that you can be working towards something. For happiness and well-being, it's looking back in our lives with a sense of accomplishment. Something you did, so you focused on something and you completed it. It doesn't have to be climbing Mount Everest. It can be small steps, but whatever it is, there is a huge sense when we move forward in relation to achieving something. Okay. So with the PERMA framework, what it looks at, so positive emotions, questions to ask yourself. Do you get to use your talents and strengths in your professional life? So do a SWOT on yourself. What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are your threats? Identify things that you do in your day to day that give you pleasure, and do as many of them as you possibly can. Engagement. Think about how you engage with other people, whether it's through sports, friends, projects, interests, hobbies, but think about who you engage with and how you feel at the end of those interactions. If you engage with things that make you feel good, keep doing them. Positive relationships. Ask yourself, do you have any frenemies in your life? And if you have frenemies, you need to move those frenemies on. Okay. And these are people who exist out there. So think about the relationships that you have with people. Spend time having conversations who at the end of that conversation, you feel better than you did at the start. Think about your professional life, your personal life. Think about changes you can make that are going to make it more meaningful. And what are you looking to achieve? So setting goals. So it's May 2020 now. What's your goals? If we sit down this time next year, what is it that you would like to have achieved over the next 12 months that would make you feel good? Doesn't have to be lofty, doesn't have to be huge, but just something that you would say, yeah, that was a good year. That was something worthwhile doing. Because the challenge is that the time goes by very, very quickly. And regrets tend to build up when we don't set aside time to think about what it is we're trying to achieve.